Hey guys, tonight we slide beneath the thick, moth-muffled blankets of a Victorian bedroom. Gaslight flickering, corset strings hanging limp over a rickety chair, and the soft rustle of a nightgown brushing across wooden floorboards. You're barefoot. It's cold. You've been offered a light supper. A bit of bread, maybe a slice of cheese, and, oh no, there's lettuce on the plate. Not much, just a modest green curl. But you pause. You glance over your shoulder like someone might be watching. Because in this era, bedtime lettuce isn't just a leaf. It's a leafy threat. You probably won't survive this, but not in the way you think. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, what time is it right now where you are, and what part of the world are you listening from? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lift the lettuce leaf with your fingers. Cool, pale, slightly wilted. It doesn't look like much, but you've entered a world where this plant isn't just something to garnish a meal. It's a moral risk. A biological wild card, a silent saboteur waiting to corrupt your nerves, your dreams, and perhaps your soul. Welcome to the Victorian fear of lettuce at bedtime. It seems quaint now, doesn't it? Like fearing shadows or worrying your spoon might be too reflective. But in the tight-laced mindscape of 19th century Britain, lettuce was tangled in a bizarre web of superstition, pseudoscience, and genuine medical confusion. You live in an age when doctors still argued over whether female hysteria could be triggered by the lunar cycle or bad posture. So, of course, a leafy green could be suspect. The fear didn't start in some back-alley apothecary. No, it tiptoed in from ancient Greece and Rome, where lettuce had contradictory reputations. The Greeks believed certain types helped induce sleep, but also warned it could dull sexual vigor. No surprise from the people who invented both democracy and philosophical angst. The Romans, ever the drama queens, swung between worshipping lettuce and fearing it. One emperor even blamed it for the death of a rival. And this vague legacy oozed down the centuries into Victorian England. By the mid-1800s, the lettuce was seen by some as a dual-edged sword. It was either an herbal sleep aid or a secret sedative that numbed the senses and paved the way for immorality. You can't make this up, but thankfully, the Victorians already did. You imagine yourself now, back in that flickering candlelit world, in the stiff collar and the heavy skirts. You're weary from the day's work. Maybe a factory bell still echoes in your ears, where your mind spins from endless ledger columns. You just want to lie down, but your landlady glances at your supper and purses her lips. No greens at this hour, she mutters. You blink. Why? She doesn't answer, just snuffs out the lamp. This bedtime myth drifted across classes. Wealthy households might avoid lettuce in the evening due to vague concerns about overexcitation of the nerves. Lower-class homes, if they could afford greens at all, whispered about it leading to disturbed dreams or worse, night fits. You lie in bed that night, listening to the pipes creak like footsteps. Your body feels fine, but is your brain unraveling? The weirdness only deepens. Some old herbals lumped lettuce in with opium. Due to its white, milk-like sap, lacticarium, which was believed to have narcotic properties. Harvest the leaves at night, distill the sap, and you might just make a Victorian tranquilizer. And some did. The problem? No one could agree on the dose, or the side effects, or whether it even worked. But the idea stuck. Lettuce could interfere with the nervous system, so better not risk it, especially before sleep. when your moral compass was allegedly already drifting. Mainstream fact: lettuce does contain trace compounds that can act as mild sedatives, lactucin and lactocopicrin. But you need to eat an Olympic pool-sized salad to feel anything more than full. But try telling that to a Victorian housemaid raised on stories of cousins who ate lettuce before bed and never woke up the same. There's even fringe chatter in old cookbooks suggesting lettuce contributed to nocturnal wandering, aka sleepwalking, which for women especially was considered deeply shameful and suspicious. Imagine poor Eliza, eyes wide, hair down, drifting past a candlelit hallway in her nightgown. Was she dreaming? Possessed? Had she eaten lettuce? Historians still argue whether these beliefs were driven more by actual health concerns or a cultural obsession with restraint. After all, this was an age when too much pleasure of any kind was dangerous. So if lettuce made you too drowsy or too dreamy, well, maybe it led to thoughts you shouldn't be having. Even art got in on the action. In some Victorian botanical illustrations, lettuce is depicted curling inward, like it's hiding something. Blushing even. Not the innocent salad base we know today. You wouldn't be surprised if someone painted it reclining faintly on a chaise lounge, like a fainting governess. And oh, the poetry. There are actual verses warning against lettuce. A 19th century pamphlet reads, "Eat not the leaf at midnight's grace, slash lest shadows cross thy dreaming face." That's not nutrition advice. That's a haunted salad warning. You remember now that poor young clergyman from Yorkshire, whose journals mentioned sleeplessness, distorted imaginations, and lettuce in the same breath. He confessed to indulging in leaf before bed, as though it were a scandalous affair. Was he joking? Hard to tell, but his doctor soon advised cold water and prayer. Not a Caesar. By now you've realized you're not just in a world with odd food opinions. You're in a psychological maze where meals could unravel morality. If lettuce, a quiet, crunchy vegetable, could spark such suspicion, what else might be lurking in the pantry? And as you lie in bed with the echoes of old fears circling your thoughts, you can almost hear it, the rustle of a lettuce leaf in the dark. Don't turn over. Just don't. You wake with a jolt. Or maybe you never truly fell asleep. It's hard to say. The room is damp, and the ceiling seems closer than it was before. You blink slowly, sensing a pressure behind your eyes, like a dream still trying to claw its way into your consciousness. Was it the lettuce? Did it open something? That's exactly what some Victorian physicians thought. And not the weird ones with skull collections and leeches in jars. The mainstream ones. They believed lettuce had the uncanny ability to unlock a part of the brain that was best left locked up tight, especially after sundown. In fact, in certain medical manuals, lettuce wasn't listed under vegetables, but under mental agents. Doesn't sound appetizing, does it? Now imagine you're sitting in a cramped consultation room, surrounded by leather-bound tomes and the strong smell of iodine. Across the desk, a doctor with disturbingly pink cheeks and a walrus mustache peers at you, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. You mention the insomnia, the anxiety, the dreams that flicker too vividly and don't fade when they should. He nods slowly. "Lettuce," he says. You blink. "What about it? You've had it recently?" "At supper." You nod, unsure if you're being diagnosed or scolded. He scribbles something and murmurs, "Laudanum would be safer." Wait, laudanum? As in a liquid opium prescribed for everything from toothaches to existential dread? Yep. In certain corners of Victorian medicine, lettuce was seen as a risky sedative. Not because it was too weak, but because it was too unpredictable. Some swore it brought calm. Others claimed it induced mental flickering or ocular disassociation, which sounds like your eyes might wander off without you. Let's back up for a second and talk about lacticarium. Remember that milky sap from before? It became all the rage in fringe medical circles, often called lettuce opium. Some apothecaries sold it as a tincture. Take a few drops for sleep, they said. Mix it into your evening tea. Sounds cozy, right? Until you realize the dosage wasn't standardized. Some batches had virtually no active compounds. Others hit like a soft hammer to the skull. One pamphlet even warned, do not operate heavy machinery after ingesting lettuce sap. Which, okay, you weren't exactly driving a forklift in 1860, but maybe don't churn butter while on it. Mainstream fact time. Lacticarium can produce very mild sedative effects, And while it was studied into the 20th century, modern medicine pretty much abandoned it in favor of more reliable options like, not rubbing salad juice into your gums. But back in Victorian England, if you complained of sleeplessness, a progressive doctor might suggest a lettuce-based preparation, boiled, steeped, or distilled. A conservative doctor might look horrified, because some believe lettuce didn't just make you sleepy, it opened a portal to something worse. Some records describe episodes following bedtime lettuce. Erratic speech, trembling, deep confusion. Was it the lettuce itself? Or had the patient also been sipping laudanum or ingesting mercury pills for intestinal wind? Historians still argue whether the lettuce was the cause or just the last thing eaten before everything went sideways. In one of the more tragic cases, a London housewife named Margaret Thornby was institutionalized after what her family described as vegetable-induced madness. The details? Sketchy. But her brother claimed she became hypnotized by her own thoughts and kept mumbling about a green veil she couldn't lift. It didn't help that she had been experimenting with homegrown sleep elixirs, including lettuce sap, poppy oil, and essence of soot. Victorian DIY was not for the faint-hearted. But the fear wasn't just medical, it was cultural. Lettuce had this uncomfortable overlap with laudanum, which was everywhere and nowhere. Sold in chemist shops and whispered about in back parlors. If lettuce could blur your dreams, it might also blur your judgment. The fact that its effects were unreliable only made it more suspicious. And there's that one London case in 1871, now the stuff of leafy legend. A young man named Peter Hemsley, barely 20, had trouble sleeping. His aunt recommended a lettuce infusion, boiled down like tea. He drank it, and then he vanished for 3 days. When he reappeared, barefoot and damp in a cemetery, he claimed he had seen things. His journal was later recovered and filled with phrases like, "The leaves whispered," and "I touched the silence." He also tried to mail himself to Belgium. Make of that what you will. A fringe tidbit for you? Some occult circles actually embraced bedtime lettuce. They believed it could enhance dream recall and aid in lucid astral ventures. These weren't your average Victorian dinner guests. These were the folks dabbling in mesmerism and spiritualism, who believed the veil between waking and sleeping was thinnest right after a proper salad. One particularly odd club, the Somnium Circle, reportedly held midnight rituals where they consumed lettuce, chanted Latin incantations, and tried to collectively dream their way into ancient Egypt. Which honestly sounds like a very crunchy sleepover. Now, pause with me and think about the contradiction. In an era obsessed with control, of the body, of society, of desire, lettuce posed a unique dilemma. It was natural. It grew in gardens. It was fed to children and invalids. Yet it might unspool the very threads of your mind. A wolf in chlorophyll clothing. You, lying there in your Victorian bed, might not even realize you've consumed a dangerous leaf until your thoughts start bending. You think of your grandmother's face, but it's on your dog's body. You hear music, but your ears are underwater. You're dreaming, maybe, or you've entered what doctors described as vegetable reverie. Not quite sleep, not quite awake, just lettuce lost. And you know what's worse? You can't tell anyone, because the moment you say, "I think the lettuce did something," you're either laughed at or quietly taken to a resting home for gentle ladies. Victorian society did not take kindly to leaf-based illusions. Still, the myth grew, leaf by leaf, whispered over soup bowls and behind fans. The bedtime lettuce became a thing to fear, not for what it always did, but for what it might. So you turn your pillow to the cold side, glance at the untouched salad on the nightstand, and wonder, is it watching you back? Don't blink. Not yet. You haven't eaten the lettuce. Yet. It sits there limp but oddly regal, next to the buttered toast on a silver tray. The corners of the napkin are folded into little church spires, very proper, very polished. And you're seated not in a dusty parlor or humble cottage, but in Buckingham Palace. That's right. You've entered the upstairs world, the realm of royalty, where everything gleams and no one breathes too loudly. And in this place, even a lettuce leaf is a matter of protocol. Because Queen Victoria, she didn't touch the stuff, at least not after dark. The story goes that her personal physician, Sir James Clark, who had a medical mustache so thick it could be used as insulation, warned her against it. Lettuce, he said, might disturb the Queen's nightly tranquility. That's posh speak for it could give her majesty very weird dreams. And in a palace where everything is managed, measured, and reported in triplicate, even dreams are subject to scrutiny. But let's back up. You're now in the royal kitchens, dressed in a borrowed apron, standing beside an overworked footman as he arranges the Queen's supper. There are rules. Each item is carefully chosen not only for taste, but for its temperament. Rice is fine. White fish is fine. Cucumber is very fine. But lettuce? Not night. Not under the watchful eye of the crown. Why? Because Queen Victoria's household was obsessed with nervous balance. That's a polite term that covered everything from migraines to melancholy to, let's be honest, good old-fashioned panic attacks. The Queen herself suffered frequent low spirits, especially after Prince Albert died. So anything that could destabilize her sleep, even vaguely, was quietly exiled from the royal diet. And lettuce was on the naughty list. Mainstream fact. In several aristocratic households, including Victoria's, there was a tradition of avoiding wet vegetables at night. They were thought to cool the humors excessively, which, if your 19th century biology is rusty, meant throwing off the body's delicate internal balance and triggering things like apathy, sadness, or spiritual drift. Basically, it was like giving your soul the flu. But here's the kicker. Queen Victoria did eat lettuce occasionally, just not close to bedtime. One recorded menu from an 1887 garden luncheon includes salade de leche paired with cold chicken. But after 7 p.m., not a leaf in sight. Instead, warm broths, steamed puddings, and tea made from gentian root. Bitter enough to wake the dead, but considered excellent for calming royal nerves. You start to wonder now, was the Queen really that afraid of lettuce? Or was it the people around her who feared what she might become if she had it? This brings us to the quiet terror of the upper class. Unseemly behavior. A monarch who dreamt too vividly. or spoke of nonsense visions upon waking, risked appearing unstable. And in Victorian England, instability, especially mental or emotional, was a social disease worse than typhoid. So yes, there were unofficial rules. Her ladies-in-waiting whispered them. Her cooks obeyed them. No strange new fruits before ceremonies. No onions before portrait sittings. And certainly no lettuce before Her Majesty tried to rest. You don't want to be the butler responsible for a royal sleepwalk into the East Wing. Historians still argue whether Victoria truly believed in the bedtime lettuce curse, or simply played along to keep peace in her famously rigid household. One of her surviving letters refers to a dinner guest who suffered terribly from dreams after too much of the leaf. It's unclear whether she was being sincere or snarky. It is Queen Victoria, after all, the woman who once called laughing undignified, except when directed at children and dogs. Meanwhile, in the medical world, physicians were split. Some claimed lettuce should be part of every evening meal to aid digestion and reduce nighttime passions. Others warned that too much, especially uncooked, might weaken the moral restraint of the mind. In short, it could make you less queen, more common actress. And that would never do. Even Victoria's own children were brought up on this leafy logic. Prince Leopold, who suffered from hemophilia and other chronic ailments, was reportedly never given lettuce at night. His nurse claimed it made him weep in his sleep and speak in rhymes upon waking. Now, whether that's true or a royal bedtime exaggeration, we'll never know, but it certainly adds to the mystique. And don't even get started on Prince Albert. The man who brought Christmas trees to Britain had opinions about salad. In one of his German letters, he describes being served a lettuce dish during a visit to Balmoral and declining on account of the lateness of hour. He then describes dreaming of a singing hare. Coincidence? Let's turn now to the servants' quarters, where all the real gossip happens. There are rumors among the scullery maids. A lady-in-waiting once snuck a lettuce leaf into her dinner roll as a rebellious joke. She later wandered the halls barefoot and humming a Bavarian lullaby. Her punishment? Double chapel attendance and a stern letter to her family. Lettuce was not funny. A fringe tidbit, there was a brief trend among certain aristocrats to use lettuce not as food, but as fragrance. Pressed into sachets and tucked under pillows, some believed it would bring calming dreams. Others claimed it summoned romantic visions. Naturally, that trend was quickly shut down by moralists who feared young ladies might use it to choose their own husbands based on leafy hallucinations. Shocking. Now back in the Queen's chambers, you notice the curtains are drawn tightly. The fire is low. Victoria herself is seated at her writing desk, finishing one of her endless letters. Her supper tray is cleared away. No salad, just a cup of valerian tea and a faint whiff of lavender. And perhaps that's all she needs. Perhaps she never feared lettuce at all, but she knew better than to tempt the night with something so unpredictable. Because in her empire, everything had its place, its proper time, and its appropriate temperature. And lettuce? That was a daytime food, a sunshine leaf. To bring it into darkness was to invite unrest. So as you quietly slip out of the royal suite, your feet silent against the velvet rug, you glance back one last time, and you swear one leaf is missing from the tray. You descend from the palace now, back into the cobbled streets, where the air smells of coal smoke, boiled cabbage, and something faintly horse-shaped. You're surrounded by regular Victorians again. Tailors and chimney sweeps, bookshop owners and laundresses, each clutching their beliefs like they clutch their pocket watches. tightly, nervously, with just a bit of dread about what might go wrong. And in this world, lettuce isn't just suspect because of sleep. It's morally dangerous. You duck into a boarding house where the walls are thin and the wallpaper peels in slow, exhausted curls. At the dinner table, a boy reaches for a few cold lettuce leaves, and his governess's eyes go wide. "Not after dusk," she says quietly, her voice tighter than her corset strings. It stirs the blood. You pause, fork madere. Did she really just say that? Oh yes. In this setting, lettuce at bedtime isn't just feared for its impact on the body. It's whispered about like some clandestine drug that unbuttons the brain and invites sin to slip inside. Because this is the century of moral control. And Victorians love moral control almost as much as they fear female ankles and unstructured leisure. See, while science was muddling along trying to decide whether lettuce was a narcotic, society had already made up its mind. Anything that messes with your dreams probably messes with your soul. And so lettuce, the shy, floppy, waterlogged cousin of cabbage, was suddenly treated as if it had ambitions. Dark, leafy ambitions. Mainstream fact. In 19th century Britain, certain foods were thought to inflame the senses or, worse, relax them too much. Spices were suspect. So were shellfish. Even tomatoes were called love apples and discouraged in some circles. Lettuce, being associated with sleepiness and a softening of the will, slithered into that same category, foods that erode the moral backbone. One particularly bonkers sermon from 1869 warned that drowsy vegetables sap manly vigor. The preacher, a red-faced man named Reverend Corbett, declared that overindulgence in lettuce could open the door to laziness, lust, and luxury. Three devils that dance upon idle dreams. This was during a campaign to keep youth clean of thoughts that softened their moral trajectory. So naturally, lettuce joined the ranks of billiards, novels, and long baths as suspiciously decadent. You now picture a man in a waistcoat and monocle standing over his teenage son's dinner plate. "No lettuce, Reginald," he says with quiet fury. "You've Latin declensions to revise. You need steel, not leaves." But moral panic wasn't limited to the male experience. For women, lettuce was often filed under the vague but terrifying label of hysteria triggers. And hysteria, as you probably know, was the Victorian answer to anything a woman did that made men uncomfortable. Speak up in public? Hysteria. Want an education? Hysteria. Stare too long at a dandelion? Probably hysteria. Lettuce, with its association to dreaminess and sedative effects, was thought to weaken the feminine resolve. It might lead to overly vivid dreams, romantic longings, or worst of all, self-reflection. And we couldn't have that. A woman who thought too much might stop obeying. She might wander the moors, or write poetry, or demand trousers. Historians still argue whether this food morality crossover was an intentional campaign or just a stew of superstition, sexism, and confusion simmering in a pot no one wanted clean. But the result was real. Books, pamphlets, and etiquette guides began issuing mealtime decorum advice, especially for women. No heavy spices, no late tea, and no greens at bedtime. Even children weren't safe. You're sitting now in a nursery beside a stern nanny in a black bonnet, holding a bowl of warm milk and a slice of dry bread. "Lettuce," she hisses, horrified, as if you'd suggested the child snort powdered nutmeg. They'll dream of devils. Indeed, some parents were told that bedtime lettuce might open the nervous pathways in young minds, leading to not just nightmares, but full-on disobedience, bedwetting, and early interest in poetry. A triple threat. One strange publication from 1873, The Proper Supper, advises parents to avoid green leaves and root vegetables after Vespers, claiming they cause sluggishness in limbs and overstimulation of the creative faculties, which is the Victorian way of saying your kid might draw on the wallpaper and question the empire. And it wasn't just households. Boarding schools took the rules seriously. Letters survived from girls' academies where pupils were given dull menus for supper. Plain porridge, boiled carrots, maybe a shred of mutton, designed to calm the spirits. Lettuce was banned completely. One headmistress even wrote that green vegetables provoked untamed dreaming, especially in girls who already showed melancholy leanings. Now that's a phrase. You begin to see how the myth self-perpetuated. A teenager has a weird dream. Must have been the lettuce. Someone breaks down sobbing in church. Should have skipped the salad. A young man fails to make eye contact with his aunt. Clearly too much leaf in his evening stew. A fringe tidbit now. Some fringe publications recommended burning lettuce leaves, not eating them. The idea was that the smoke, when gently waved under one's nose, would promote daytime calm. But warned never inhale before bed, as it could send the soul wandering where it may not return unchanged. Think of it as proto-vape panic, Victorian edition. So you're lying in bed again, this time in a guest room above a bakery in Norwich. The wallpaper features faded roses, and the mattress is too short for your legs. You've eaten a light supper, potatoes, meat pie, and just a tiny wedge of salad someone slipped onto the plate without thinking. You didn't mean to eat it. It just happened. Now you're staring at the ceiling, wondering, am I still moral? Is that a sin knocking at the door of your dream? Or is that just the cat trying to get in again? Either way, you clutch the blanket a little tighter. Because if you fall asleep now, and something strange flickers through your mind, visions of velvet-clad ghosts or dancing horses, you won't really know whether it was the lettuce or just everything else this uptight society never lets you say aloud. You open your eyes to a new setting, muted light, wooden floors, and the slow ticking of a long-case clock. You're inside the world of nannies, governesses, and ever-watchful parental eyes. Welcome to the Victorian nursery, where the ceilings are too high, the discipline is tight, and every child's cough becomes a moral failing. And yes, even here, especially here, the fear of lettuce thrives. Because if there's one thing more terrifying to the average Victorian parent than a wilting economy or a French novel, it's a twitchy child at bedtime. And wouldn't you know it, lettuce is now being blamed for exactly that. A little boy fidgets under his blanket, wide-eyed and whispering about shadowy rabbits in waistcoats. The nanny peers suspiciously at the half-empty supper plate beside him. He had lettuce again, she mutters darkly. That'll be another night of disturbances. You pause mid-sock pulling. Disturbances? Yes. Night terrors. Twitching limbs. Sleep-talking. And, in one particularly famous case, a child speaking fluent Welsh while asleep despite being from East London. That incident, which may or may not have involved lettuce, but definitely involved public hysteria, was cited in multiple educational pamphlets as a warning against feeding vegetative soporifics to developing minds. Mainstream fact, by the 1870s, many upper and middle-class British households followed structured dietary schedules for children. Warm foods in the morning, starchy staples by afternoon, and plain, comforting dishes in the evening. Lettuce, raw, cold, and unpredictable, was officially discouraged for young ones after 5 p.m. A doctor named Charles Templeton wrote in his 1876 Household Guide to Temper Children that greens of the leafy persuasion must be restricted to daylight hours, lest the nerves be agitated and the dreams become wretchedly mobile. That's not bedtime advice. That's a haunted salad review. And of course, governesses took it even further. You follow Miss Penelope Gray, 27 years old, tightly coiffed hair, emotionally repressed since 1853. She runs her nursery like a ship, timed, tidy, and terrifying. Her 3 charges are washed, brushed, and dressed in matching nightgowns. Their supper is warm oat gruel and a sad-looking biscuit. No garnish, no color, no lettuce, because Miss Gray has seen things. She once worked in a home where a 6-year-old was given cucumber and butter lettuce before bedtime. That night, he sleepwalked to the conservatory, dismantled an entire fern, and reportedly told the housemaid she would never be alone in the trees again. He later became a poet. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether Victorian nannies sincerely believed lettuce caused bad dreams, or if they were just desperate for peace and quiet after 12 hours of shoelace tying, hymn reciting, and scolding. But either way, the result was clear: no greens after sundown. One popular 19th century child-rearing manual, Rules for Proper Rest, described lettuce as the vegetable which grants drowsiness, but extract control. That line alone tells you everything you need to know. Control was everything. Victorian children weren't raised to flourish. They were raised to obey. A dream that slipped too far out of bounds might mean a child questioning authority, talking back, or, worse, developing imagination. Now, imagination was fine in very small doses. A single sketch of a cat wearing boots? Lovely. A story involving sentient vegetables leading a rebellion against the queen? Concerning. And so lettuce, with its mystery chemicals and dreamy reputation, was banished from the nursery menu. Fringe tidbit for you. In some homes, lettuce substitutes were used, specially boiled spinach or cabbage mashed into bland oblivion to fulfill the texture requirements of a salad without inviting dreams. Think of it as the decoff of the Victorian supper world. One governess called it mock lettuce and insisted it was quite moral. There was even a short-lived trend among experimental doctors and vaguely concerned uncles to test the effects of lettuce on children's dreams. One infamous diary, written by amateur physician Thomas Welby, a man who also tried to invent toothpaste made of ashes, documents his efforts to feed lettuce-infused broth to his nephew before bed. The child reported a dream of a giant brass rabbit and a boat made of teeth. Welby declared the test inconclusive. His nephew later refused to eat anything green for a decade. You're now in a boarding school for girls. Age range, 9 to 16. Emotional range, stifled to hysterical. At supper, the menu is grim: mutton, toast, and a boiled egg that has clearly seen better months. There's a single small dish of lettuce at the far end of the table, and nobody touches it. Why? Because one student did. Mary, age 13, ambitious, clever, whispered to have read Jane Eyre in secret. She ate a few leaves one evening on a dare. That night, she dreamt of flying over rooftops and saw her own grave from above. She woke up screaming in Latin. The lettuce was removed from the dining room, permanently. Mary was sent home. No one spoke of her again. The moral danger had claimed another victim. Even among adults, the bedtime lettuce child link continued to hold. You'd hear respectable ladies in park benches say things like, "Of course little Emmeline doesn't sleep. Her governess insists on giving her salad after tea." and the listener would gasp softly, as if Emmeline were being force-fed ghost stories. Now, modern medicine might laugh this off. There's no strong evidence that lettuce disrupts children's sleep patterns. But in Victorian England, belief could shape reality. A child told lettuce causes bad dreams might well toss and turn out of sheer anticipation. And then, the prophecy fulfilled itself. So you lie in the upstairs bedroom now, the nursery light turned down low. You hear the clock strike 11. You hear the shuffle of stockings in the hallway. You hear, faintly, the sound of someone breathing heavily, dreaming too vividly. You hope it's not from lettuce. You hope you haven't let your thoughts wander too far, because once they wander, they don't always return the same. You've just settled into the corner of a candlelit laboratory in 1871. The wallpaper peels slightly, the gaslights hum faintly overhead, and somewhere, an assistant drops a brass instrument with a clatter. Welcome to the world of Victorian pseudoscience, where men in stiff collars clutch lettuce leaves with trembling hands and mutter things like stimulates carnal fog, may induce moral evaporation. You're not sure what that means either, but apparently neither were they. In this age of speculative science, lettuce isn't just a salad component. It's a botanical enigma, a suspicious suspect in an imagined conspiracy to unmanned British masculinity. You shuffle a little closer to a thick-bound ledger labeled Botanical Excitants and Moral Decline because, well, you're curious like that. Inside, pages stained with ink and self-doubt, detailing earnest experiments that claim lettuce. Yes, lettuce could corrupt the body and muddle the soul. One infamous pamphlet, published by a society no one remembers today, but which sounded something like the Natural Order Preservationist Guild, claimed that lettuce was a stealthy force acting on nocturnal emissions and daytime impulses alike. Their theory? That bedtime lettuce caused erotic dreams, which in turn led to early morning, unclean awakenings. Nocturnal pollutions, they called it. Crisp-triggered chaos, you might call it. The science behind these accusations? Nearly non-existent. Victorian botanists occasionally referenced lacticarium, the milky sap in lettuce, which shares distant chemical cousins with opium, but not the kind of cousins you'd invite to dinner. Lacticarium does have trace sedative effects, but they're so mild you'd have to eat a garden's worth of wilted romaine just to feel a yawn. Still, back then, any association with altered states of consciousness was enough to raise eyebrows and, occasionally, full-blown public panic. Enter Dr. Jabez Humblewick. Yes, really, a former apothecary turned self-declared neurological moralist. His most well-known experiment involved 3 orphan boys, a dim room, and alternating diets of porridge, watercress, and lettuce over the course of several weeks. On the lettuce nights, he claimed, the boys were prone to restlessness, moaning, and sudden hand movements beneath the bedclothes. Historians still argue whether Dr. Humblewick was observing symptoms or projecting Victorian guilt onto innocent twitching. You scoff, but this man received funding. In another curious corner of pseudoscience, lettuce was implicated in the rise of what one very serious journal called domestic dormancy, a condition supposedly afflicting men who ate too much of the leafy stuff. Symptoms? Weak limbs, droopy eyelids, and an utter disinterest in marital duties. The leaf that leeches the loin declared an editorial in the Stiff Collar Review, sounding very concerned. Yet for all the bad lettuce press, some voices tried to stick up for the humble salad green. A few alternative health manuals from the time suggested that lettuce might, in fact, be beneficial for bedtime digestion and even curb overstimulation. They were promptly mocked in society pages and sometimes accused of promoting what Victorians coyly called self-indulgence. Because if lettuce was calming, and calm led to private thoughts, and private thoughts led to, well, you get the picture. Of course, none of this stopped people from continuing their experiments. Backyard scientists, overzealous clergymen, and road dietitians alike. A traveling lecturer named Professor Cottlesworth reportedly carried jars of lettuce sap to country fairs and gave out free drops to prove they wouldn't make you swoon into a moral stupor. Then again, he also tried to sell fermented celery as a cure for female fury, so perhaps his bar for credibility was a touch low. By 1892, one especially odd paper made its rounds through London society salons, titled The Nightshade of the Salad World. It posited that lettuce, due to its botanical structure and visual resemblance to other sluggish plants, might induce moral mimicry, a vague condition wherein your personality would begin to mirror the plant's characteristics. Lethargy, moisture retention, passive-aggressiveness. Yes, really. Lettuce was likened to that friend who always cancels plans and texts. Sorry, just so drained RN. You pause here. Because, honestly, that's kind of fair. Still, others feared lettuce not for what it did, but for what it didn't do. It wasn't spicy. It wasn't fortifying. It didn't brace the nerves like mutton or goose. To some Victorian moralists, anything not actively making you stronger must be making you weaker. A sort of food-based social Darwinism. The empire does not rest on greens, barked one particularly patriotic food columnist. Imagine that printed above the breakfast table in gold leaf lettering. And yet, throughout it all, you can't help but notice something oddly touching. For all their bluster, these were people trying, awkwardly, anxiously, to understand their world. They didn't know what dreams were. They feared anything that made them feel soft, sleepy, or strange. And in that twilight of ignorance, even a lettuce leaf could look like a threat. So here you are, centuries later, snuggled up under a weighted blanket, wondering whether your dinner salad might unlock a dream about flying giraffes or morphing into your high school gym teacher. The truth? Your lettuce is innocent. Mostly. But now that you know it once stood accused of moral sabotage, you may never look at it quite the same way again. And if you do dream a little oddly tonight, well, maybe blame it on the vinaigrette. Now, let's step sideways into the bedroom of an 1890s Parisian artist who swears his dreams are sharper when he eats lettuce before bed. The man is named Etienne Bourdain, no relation to that Bourdain, and his dream journal, titled Les Visions Verts, The Green Visions, reads like a feverish salad-fueled version of the Divine Comedy. He claimed lettuce didn't just soothe his nerves, it opened the portals of unconscious geometry, whatever that means. In one entry, he writes, "Last night, I was a fish made of marble, swimming through a soup of clocks. I blame the butter lettuce." Oddly enough, some of his lettuce-inspired sketches do look a bit like Picasso's early work. One art historian once speculated that leafy greens may have indirectly contributed to Cubism. She was laughed off stage, but still got a book deal. From Paris to Prague, the lettuce legend lingered. A Bohemian mystic named Ludmila Hruzova sold sachets of dried romaine as dream enhancers to literary students and day laborers alike. Testimonials claimed the lettuce pouches led to dreams about flying through crystal skies or talking to deceased relatives who whispered stock tips. One butcher dreamed he turned into a loaf of bread and was lovingly buttered by his long-lost father. He described it as profoundly healing. Meanwhile, back in England, The medical establishment slowly began retracting its earlier hysteria. By 1905, lettuce had gone from nighttime corrupter to harmless garnish. In fact, Queen Alexandra herself reportedly had a fondness for cucumber and lettuce tea sandwiches. When the tabloids got wind of this, one columnist wrote, "If lettuce is vice, then God Save Our Queen is an anthem of sin." Sales of lettuce doubled in a fortnight. Still, the paranoia never entirely died. Even in the early 20th century, whispers persisted among the moralistic fringe. At least one boarding school in Wales forbade lettuce in evening meals, citing night shenanigans that supposedly increased when the leaf was served. Their records suggest the real culprit was unsupervised access to penny novels and candle stubs. But old habits die hard. And now, dear reader, you arrive at the final and possibly most ridiculous episode in the long, tangled dream of sleepy lettuce lore. The 1947 Lettucegate trial in Colorado Springs, USA. An eccentric inventor named Clarence Billings was arrested for promoting a device he called a nocturne platter, a silver plate meant to elevate and moon-infuse your bedtime lettuce. He claimed the lunar rays interacting with chlorophyll enhanced lucid dreaming and could reveal past lives. His clientele included aging poets, 2 minor Hollywood starlets, and one congressman who swore he briefly dreamt he was a 14th century Flemish goose wrangler. The trial was short, sensational, and ultimately dismissed when it was ruled that no lettuce had actually been harmed, and everyone involved was probably just lonely. So what are we left with? A few facts. Lettuce contains lacticarium, a gentle sedative. Some people report better sleep after eating it, likely due to suggestion. It has never been proven to cause erotic dreams, moral ruin, or fish-based hallucinations. But a bigger truth also remains. The human mind loves a good myth, especially when it's green, leafy, and just a little bit weird. We've turned a vegetable into a villain, a leaf into a lover, a bedtime snack into a cosmic portal. Maybe that's what makes us beautifully human, our ability to stare into a salad and see the infinite. So tonight, as you chew thoughtfully on your dinner salad, maybe add an extra leaf. Not because it will sedate you, not because it will reveal your soul, but because somewhere a long-dead Victorian gentleman is watching and clutching his collar in mild horror. Sweet dreams, you lettuce-loving dreamer.